Great. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We're so happy to have you both in person, and we have some Zoom attendees as well. So welcome to everyone. So we're in the midst of creating the city's budget for fiscal year 24-25, and this is the point in the process when we present the budget to the community and get your feedback and input. So my name is Laura McDowell. I'm the city clerk, and joining me we have Katie Gauntlet, our Director of Parks and Recreation, Nick DeWin, our Director of Public Works, Interim City Manager Amy Cunningham, Claire Hartman, our Community Development Director, Jim Noggle, our Chief of Police, and way at the end, we have Carla Cavallo DeGraff, our Finance Director. So Interim City Manager Cunningham will be presenting the budget along with Nick and Claire. We'll have time for questions and answers at the end for both in-person participants and those joining us on Zoom. And with that, I'd be happy to turn it over to our wonderful Interim City Manager, Amy Cunningham.
Thank you, Laura. Welcome to those of you here tonight in person and online. Thank you for attending the city's annual community budget workshop. This meeting is held so that we can get information from you about the city's budget and ask questions, answer the questions you have always wanted to ask. Tonight's meeting is virtual and in person and has been scheduled based on your feedback about how you want to receive budget information and engage in the budget development process. The workshop is being recorded and will be available on the city's website in a few days if you'd like to watch the presentation again or share the video with family and friends. And the slides are already posted on the website if you wanted to access those later. Oh. Am I not close enough to my mic? I'm on. We appreciate your interest in the city's budget and hope that the information we share tonight is informative for you and provides you with a greater understanding of the city's finances. Tonight, we plan to share information about the annual budget development process, provide background information about the city's finances and operating and capital budgets, and we'll conclude with questions from you. We have staff from all city departments here to help answer your questions and talk more about the services their departments provide. Allocation of the city's scarce resources should reflect your service priorities. There are many opportunities for you to provide input into the budget process as shown here. Upcoming council meetings where the budget will be discussed are shown on this slide, and as you can see, we'll be meeting at least once each month from April through June to talk about the budget. In addition, the budget is discussed at several other public meetings, including the Finance Advisory Commission, which meets monthly at 7:30 in the morning if you'd like to join us. The Planning Commission for review of the capital program conformance with the general plan, and the Recreation, Cultural, and Community Services Commission, among others. And as always, you can submit written comments to the City Council or staff, whether through our popular e-comment tool or directly via email. Council and staff value your input, and it helps guide development of the budget. We also make 2 online surveys available to you each year. As mentioned a moment ago, the first survey asked how you wanted to participate in this workshop. We've scheduled tonight's meeting based on your feedback. Overwhelmingly, you said you wanted a virtual meeting held on a weekday evening, but this year we've used new technology, which may or may not be working as we expected, that we're here in person as well. The second survey, which is still open, asks you to provide feedback about the city's budget priorities. The results of that survey will be presented at the April 9th City Council Budget Development Study Session, and you can access that survey on the city's website now. The webpage is up there on this slide. One other critical element that informs development of the annual budget is the council's strategic plan. The strategic plan provides the framework for the budget process and informs the council's objectives and work plan through 2025. When the current plan concludes, a new plan will be developed to help guide us in future years. The council identified 5 priority objectives in their work plan as shown on this slide: living well together, great places, environmental stewardship, a city that works, and economic vitality. Work plan items that support these objectives and need resources are included in the budget.
The full strategic plan and individual work plan items are available on the city's website. I'm going to pause for a moment and make sure that our technology is working. Great. Before turning the presentation over to our finance director, I'll talk a bit about our financial structure. One of Novato's greatest fiscal challenges is structural in nature. The city's two largest revenue streams are property tax and sales tax. These two categories make up almost 75% of general fund revenue. We're fortunate that the city's property tax revenue is stable and can be counted on year over year. However, Novato does have the lowest property tax rate of all Marin County cities at 7%. Compare this to the largest city in the county, San Rafael, at over 12%, or even the highest rate cities of Mill Valley at almost 26%, or San Anselmo and Larkspur at about 21 or 22% each. At 7%, Novato is considered a low property tax city, as established by Prop 13. We're often asked how to change that rate, and unfortunately, there isn't a way to do that. In 1978, when Prop 13 was approved, Novato's 7% rate was locked in. Of each property tax dollar you pay in Novato, the city receives 7 cents. Keep in mind that the city is expected and oftentimes mandated by the state or others to provide a wide variety of services, from building inspections to recreational programming to street and park maintenance and public safety. You can see all the directors of all those services sitting up here. Many of the other agencies shown here, such as the Library and Sanitation District at about 2% in the other category, or the College of Marin at 6.6%, provide just a single type of service with their property tax allocation. Sales tax is less stable than property tax and is vulnerable to economic impacts, both positive and negative. At almost 35% of our revenue, we depend on sales tax to maintain our critical services. Of the 8.5% sales tax collected in Novato, only 1.25% returns to the city. Sales tax is paid by locals and visitors alike, and not all goods are taxed. For instance, groceries and prescription medications are exempt from sales tax. Sales tax is one of the few revenue streams we have influence over locally and is an area the council has directed us to look at to help stabilize funding of the city's fiscal position. As mentioned before, Novato's sales tax rate is 8.5%, but just 1.25% of that comes back to support local services here. Other cities in Marin County that are at 8.25% are Mill Valley, Belvedere, Ross, and Tiburon, but Mill Valley also recently said they're looking at pursuing a local sales tax measure. The two largest agencies around us, Petaluma and San Rafael, are already at 9.5 and 9.25% respectively, with voters having increased their sales tax rates to provide for local services. As you're probably aware, the city's been running operational deficits for the past several years. This situation is not sustainable, and we can only do so much with the limited resources we have available. We want to do more for you. In recent times, we've been able to fund critical services with one-time monies, funds from sales of properties like the Hamilton Commissary parcel, and federal American Rescue Plan funds. Even with those dollars, we still experience deficits, though. And now those one-time monies have been fully used. We no longer have those funding sources available to support ongoing operations for things like police patrols, park maintenance, and filling potholes. Our starting budget deficit this year was $2.6 million, and without significant service cuts, it will grow again next year. These numbers reflect just our operating budget deficits and do not reflect our deferred infrastructure maintenance needs. Infrastructure is things like road maintenance, facilities, sidewalk and traffic safety enhancements, and storm drains. Because we don't have adequate funding, we've not been investing at the levels necessary to maintain these important assets. The City Council's current strategic plan includes an initiative to address the city's chronic revenue shortfalls by exploring an increase to sales tax. This is also an area the grand jury suggested the city explore to address ongoing deficits. If the council decides to place a sales tax on the ballot this November, Voters could decide to increase the tax by 3/4 cent, generating about $10 million a year. These funds could be used to preserve existing city services and ensure those services the community cares about most can continue at their current levels. Funds could also be used to maintain our infrastructure. We know we're not investing enough in our streets, and we definitely hear that from you very clearly, and we want to fix that. Having new locally controlled sources of revenue is critical to the city's future financial sustainability and our ability to preserve current services and infrastructure. Time to pass the clicker. Up next is Carla Carvalho de Graaf, the city's finance director. We'll talk about the operating budget, and then Public Works Director Nick Nguyen will talk about the capital program. And as Laura had mentioned, at the conclusion, we'll have the opportunity to interact with you, and you can ask us some questions. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Amy. As Amy said, I'm the finance director, and I'm presenting the operating budget to you. We're, of course, looking at the fiscal year 23-24 operating budget because we are just in the development of the fiscal year 24-25 budget development process. So this is our general fund summary, and our operating budget is within our general fund. That is the fund that has the least restrictions from a use perspective. We have a lot of restricted revenue, which you will see our Director of Public Works talk about with regard to funding of capital improvement projects. This is our overview. The first column is the adopted budget, and the second column is the amended budget. When we started the year, we were in a $1.3 million deficit, and the current deficit is $3.3 million, and that is a budgeted deficit. We actually, City Council actually amended the budget during the budget adoption hearing as the labor negotiations had just finalized and resulted in the need of an additional $1.3 million. And so that at the beginning of the fiscal year, we had a $2.6 million deficit that you saw in the slide that Amy discussed a little bit earlier. Mid-year adjustments, which were just approved by City Council, increased the deficit slightly to the $3.3 million. So the general fund budget, of course, is made up of revenue and expenses. This is the revenue slide. As Amy mentioned, the two largest sources of revenue are property tax and sales tax. Together, they make up nearly 70% of the budget, and it's 69.6, about 0.5% down from fiscal year 22-23. Property tax revenue has increased year over year, budget-wise, but it is in line with the actual earnings from 22-23, but this doesn't change the share of property tax that we get. So if property transfers, you may earn a little bit more, but we're stuck at the 7 cents on a dollar. Sales tax has increased slightly year over year, about $400,000. Recent trends show inflation has cooled, although the Fed has not hit their desired targets. Overall consumer spending hasn't slowed, so you're not seeing huge decreases in spending, and obviously sales taxes on consumer spending. Other taxes includes transit occupancy tax, which is the hotel tax, which for Novato is really based on business travel. This has been slow to recover for us back to pre-pandemic levels of 1.8 million, though at mid-year, we cautiously increased this to reflect full recovery. Business license fees are also in this category. Charges for services include community services such as permit fees and park and recreation fees. We increase these fees by CPI at the start of each fiscal year. And one-time funds are funds from prior years, like the sale of the property that Amy mentioned, and they are allocated to one-time costs that are going to be used within the year. And some of these funds have rolled forward from the prior year to this year. They fund things like Climate Action Plan or the Parks Master Plan. Making sure I'm on the right slide. So this is the expense slide, and as you see, expenses are $53 million, and services are provided primarily through city staff, and that comprises 66% of the budget, and that's staff like police officers, park and recreation staff, and public works maintenance workers. And it is important for us and the continuity of services to be able to retain and recruit staff. So there was a COLA increase, and that was the labor negotiations that I mentioned and increased the deficit. It was negotiated with the bargaining units. There are also increases to expenses that we cannot control, like utility increases, insurance increases, and increases to benefits costs. Professional services have been impacted by having vacancies on staff and having to hire consultants. The one-time money I mentioned on the revenue side in this slide on the expense side is in the professional services category. In fiscal year 1920, during the pandemic, the City Council made the difficult decision to eliminate 17 positions. The city is still 11 positions under the fiscal year 2019-2020 budgeted FTE, full-time equivalent, one person, one position. The 2023-2024 employee full-time equivalent count has increased to add positions to community development based on an assessment performed by Baker Tilly. Director Hartman, to my left, presented this study to City Council just this past Tuesday. The City Council approved this increase to ensure that city staff in community development and the building operations are able to improve service to the community in the building department at the permit counter. Director Hartman has made shifts internally and is backfilling some positions so that she's been very fiscally conscious in her planning. And this is our 20-year personnel history trend. You can see that personnel was at a high of 234, but that was really almost 20 years ago. In recent times, recent economic downturns, like in 2010 with the housing crash, staff was contracted, and then during the pandemics, the personnel cost and personnel were contracted again. Just really to, show you the trend line. We wanted to show both the 5-year view and the 20-year view. So that's it on the operating budget. And I'm now going to turn it over to Nick Nguyen, our Director of Public Works, and we're going to hand the clicker down again.
Thank you, Carla, and thank you, Amy. My name is Nicholas Nguyen. I'm the Director of Public Works, and I have the distinct pleasure to present to you all tonight the city's draft capital improvement program. My brief discussion will essentially take us through where we've been in the last year, where we are going, and where we are proposing to go in the new fiscal year. The capital improvement program is a budgeting and planning tool for the city's major infrastructure projects, where we would identify key projects, forecast their cost, and budget for them. These projects are identified and prioritized through various filters, notably city council input, community input, condition assessments, and funding limitations. Year to year, there are several key city objectives when we update and implement the capital improvement program. Firstly, it has been and always to practice fiscal responsibility and management. I would touch on this a bit more later in my presentation. And lastly, we're always looking to streamline our budgeting, funding, and accounting practices so that we can be as efficient as possible in managing and deploying project funds. Before I get into some of the budget numbers, I would like to take a moment to take stock in the work that we've been doing, the majority of which were funded by non-general fund sources. In other words, state grants, federal grants, other restricted funds that come in from other sources and not the general fund. City staff, along with support from residents such as yourselves, we were able to deliver some very impactful projects. These include the Pioneer Park Play Area Upgrade Project. The project concept was initiated in 2022, and construction is now nearly complete with a grand opening event scheduled for April, and Katie, to my left, will be heading that grand opening. The total project cost was approximately $1.3 million for that project. Additional playground improvement projects were completed this past year at Bahia Oak Park, Olive Tot Lot, South Hamilton Park, and Miwok Park. The project itself was initiated also in 2022 with construction work kicking off in September 2023 and was completed in late 2023, November 23. The total construction cost for the 4 park locations was approximately $433,000. Here, we are in the midst of completing our annual street rehab project and crosswalk enhancement project. 2 years ago, so going back to our fiscal responsibility, 2 years ago, inflation was still very high. Prices of goods and services reached new levels. This caused us to really rethink how we're going to bid out these projects. So we essentially combine 3 separate projects into one to achieve significant economy of scales during the construction bid process. This combined project consists of 44 street segments that will be resurfaced in the next month or so, 121 ADA wheelchair ramps that were constructed, and countless new high visibility signs and beacons that were installed. You would probably see some of them on Novato Boulevard, for example, where they have been turned on already. Work has been ongoing and is anticipated to be complete by the end of May. We were able, in this case, to secure and invest approximately $5 million of non-city general funds to this project. Another project that everyone has been waiting for a great deal of time is the Grant Avenue Bridge Rehabilitation Project. 15 years in the making. Construction will ramp up starting in April and is anticipated to be completed in January of 2025. There may be some opportunities to accelerate the work if we can close the bridge completely to traffic for about a 2-month period, but that's another bridge we will cross when we get there. On the following slide is the DeLong and Diablo Avenue Traffic and Pedestrian Safety Project just out back here behind the council chambers. We received approximately $1.2 million in federal grants to enhance traffic and pedestrian safety in this busy downtown corridor. With a required city matching of about $300,000, we kicked off the project this past January with sidewalk work, and the rest, which is the paving work, will be completed later in May. Finally, we have one project that is ongoing, which is the Novato Boulevard Widening Project. We conceived this project back in 2018. We are working right now with the design for the project and coordinating the utility work with PG&E, Novato Sanitary, and North Marin Water. A lot of this coordination work does take time, and the estimate for the project is currently between $10 and $15 million. Luckily, we received about $12 million from the Transportation Authority of Marin through their sales tax measure, Measure A. So we are holding that in reserve and continuing down a path of design, and also working with utility companies to do their undergrounding work. As to where we want to go or what we want to propose in going with the CIP projects for fiscal year 24-25, these are the fund sources that the city would typically access if they were actually available. So we have on the street and pathway side, we have external funds such as the Transportation Authority of Marin, the gas taxes that we receive annually speaking, vehicle registration fees as well. So those are the funds that we would be able to access on the street and utility and drainage project for those projects. For park projects and recreational facilities, we would generally have access to some restricted funds, such as the subdivision fees, the county parks measure A measure, developer impact fees, for example, we would have access to, and potentially other federal and state and regional grants, but those are really slim nowadays, and so those will be certainly a blessing, but not guaranteed. And finally, on the municipal building funds opportunities, they're mainly just through general funds. So in terms of the draft estimates for our revenues going into 24-25 and also 23-24 current, we're really projecting at the moment these fund sources being available to us for projects. So roughly, we're estimating for fiscal year 24-25, we would have about 2.9, close to $3 million in available funds to deploy for our capital projects. Most of it are restricted funds, such as the gas tax. And really, the only available general fund is what we call there the long-term maintenance funds up above. So as I had pointed out, there have been grants that have helped us deliver some of the projects over the past. But looking towards fiscal year 24-25, we have no new grants available to us. So having said all that, these are the new projects that we're proposing for fiscal year 24-25. Annually speaking, we do have an annual street rehabilitation project, and so we will be programming that particular project for next year using gas tax funds and some transportation authority of Marin funds as well. So those would not touch our general fund. We'll also be programming or proposing to program an annual traffic striping and markings project, also to be funded through gas tax. And a project to replace our aging wooden streetlight poles. We are looking to use general fund for that project. And then lastly, with the pending adoption of the Parks Master Plan, we are forecasting a new project to address the short-term projects that have been identified in that particular master plan. And we'll be using some subdivision fees that we collect from development to pay for that particular project. That project is in the form of ADA accessibility projects that are more minor in scale that we could package into one project. So that concludes my presentation. And so just circling back here on the 24-25 annual street rehabilitation project. Again, we're going to be developing a list of candidates to resurface in the upcoming year, and we anticipate to program about $1.7 million for that project. And in regards to the Park Master Plan near-term accessibility improvements, these are the type of improvements that we're going to be targeting. Things such as ADA parking and ADA accessibilities throughout our parks. And I believe that is my last slide. I'm going to turn it back to Interim City Manager Amy.
Okay, thank you. So next, we're very happy you're here. We appreciate your participation in tonight's process. Up here, we have some April dates that you might find of interest. If you want to continue to participate in here as the budget process for next fiscal year develops,